I'm Dane Rosen. Let's talk about difficult clients and why difficult clients are such a big deal in terms of well-being, income in business. So the first thing to look at is identity. And an identity is a pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, and action. And we develop identities for different contexts. But because most of us work 6 to 12 hours a day, the work identity is often the largest or strongest identity in our lives, particularly as men who are measured more by money and income. And so when that identity is challenged, there's a real sense that our core identity is being challenged. And a difficult client can challenge our work identity. If a difficult client doesn't pay or doesn't offer a good reference, etc., then that can bode to the future of what seems like our biggest identity. And so a difficult client can have an enormous impact on our lives. So let's look at a couple of the things within your control. So you're going to encounter clients that are easier to deal with than others, and you're going to find clients that are more difficult to deal with. That's just part of being in business. On that front, one of the things that you can do is to generate more work than you need. And this isn't possible with the paradigm of boundless growth, but in my personal paradigm of a goal of making roughly $100,000 a year, maybe $150,000, in order to fund what is a $10,000 lifestyle, and then stop. My goal is to do that in as few days of the year as possible. And so, I'll often do that in 6 months, and then free up time to travel or do other things. And so within that paradigm, if I generate $300,000 worth of inquiries and just take $150,000 of that in work, I can pick the clients that I believe are a better fit, which gets to the next point, which is that in many cases, difficult clients are difficult for us in particular. So a client that is anal retentive can totally cramp the style of a more artistic, spontaneous personality, but be perfect for another business owner who is anal retentive and actually appreciates another anal retentive person who notices all that they do and who can give them direction. And so part of the issue is sorting, meaning, is this customer good for me in particular? And part of it is marketing, meaning there are some clients who are terrible to work with for just about anyone, whether they steal or come up with ways not to pay you or whatever it is. That's just who they are. And if you can sort through who is who, then you can, if you've got more work than you need or want, then you can pick the better client. So that's a privilege that is earned. It's earned most concretely by becoming great at what you do to such an extent that you've got more people wanting to hire you than you're able to do the work. And that leads to the next point, which is the most competent, ethical, reliable, et cetera, landscapers in the country have work. the best 1% have work. The most likely to be unemployed in a recession, etc., are the people with poor competencies, poor reputations, etc. And I'm not just talking about work, because, for example, you can have a late, ornery, highly competent mason, but if being on time and being polite is a primary value for the client, then they are incompetent at being on time and being courteous. And vice versa. You can have a very polite and timely person who does a poor job at masonry, and different clients are focused on different things. And so the client that values courtesy or even good looks or whatever it is that a client values will pick the people who are strong in that and may compromise in some other area. And so there is generally a good fit for a certain type of contractor and a certain type of client. And your job is to find that fit. Now, this is one of the reasons I don't do free bids without design, because someone might accept my bid before I got to know them as a client. And I want to get to know my clients a little bit before spending months of my time installing their job. I do one job full attention until complete. I have a small crew. My next two contracts are both over $100,000. And so I'm going to spend more than a month with each of those clients. And that's going to be a month of either deteriorating hell, or it's going to be a wonderful month of, enjoying each other's company, watching the garden grow, etc. So the things that you can do, because you cannot turn a bad client into a good client. If a client is not the good fit for your values and personality, it's not a success for you to change who you want to be if you're embodying that. And it's not a successful plan to try and change the client from being who they are. Neither of those are successful plans. So the trick is to preempt. It's much easier to prevent a problem than it is to fix it in most cases. And that's definitely the case with difficult clients. So how do you get to know if a client is a difficult client? Well, to give one example, in one of my most difficult clients, the relationship began like this. Woman calls me on the phone, loves my website. Can I meet her at this time at her house? I show up at that time at the house. She's not there. So red flag number one, she's not reliable. Her husband is there. The husband has not been told about me. Red flag number two, she doesn't communicate with her husband. The husband calls her when I say I have an appointment with her, and she blames me for being there at the wrong time when I have it in my calendar and I have it in my email. So she blames other people for her mistakes rather than apologize and take responsibility. And then the next thing is she tells me while he's listening on the phone, he's handed me the phone, not that she doesn't care what her husband wants, that whatever her husband wants doesn't matter. She wants to do this and this and this and this. So she's just told me in 5 minutes, meaning all of these red flags have occurred in 5 minutes. And she's just told me I'm unreliable, I blame other people for mistakes, I don't include and communicate with my partner, and I'm actually hostile towards the person who's going to be paying for it. She didn't have any money. This was her husband's money. And so this told me that she was in the top 1% of difficult clients. Now, this is my point to either, I'm so sorry, I got a really big job, I won't be available for the next 6 months, or I'm sorry, it doesn't feel like a fit, so good luck and be on your way. But in this case, it was 2008, 2009, the economy had collapsed. And so, and they were quite a wealthy client. And so the question was, how do I work successfully? Meaning, how do I turn a lemon into lemonade for me? Not changing the client and all their shenanigans, but how do I come out of this making more money than usual and knowing what I'm getting into and not be stuck and blamed for the dysfunction of the family. So in my Landscape Success course, I went into great detail on this particular client because I invented several specific protocols, and the woman actually complimented me. It was kind of an odd compliment. I think she understood the setup and understood, how hostile it was to me and her husband to be playing someone. She said to me, it was really smart the way you did this, and this, so as not to be blamed for this, and this. In other words, she'd set out to blame me, and she found she couldn't. She'd set out to punish her husband, and that didn't happen. And it didn't happen because I took a number of steps that resulted in me making more money than I would have charged a normal client, coming out ahead of schedule. And, I took a month vacation after that job and had the money to do so. And so I talk about that. But the key is you've got to have an interaction that allows you to spend time with that client and see who they are. Because some clients are a pain in the neck and you need to charge a pain in the neck fee. Now, you can't list that on your bid, of course, pain in the neck client, 30% markup. But if you give fixed cost bids, you can build 30% markup into those bids. The other thing is you need to know client weak in this. For example, if a client is forgetting things all the time, you've got to write all these conversations down and send them an email so that when they do forget them, you can say, I understand that you forgot that, but here's what we said in the email. I told you this because here it is in the email. Here it is in the contract. And so you need to see your clients in order to understand. And it's also valuable to understand that we are in the psychological business. Nobody needs to do anything in their garden. The reason they're doing something in their garden, as opposed to just letting it do whatever it does and stay the way it is because they believe that that's the thing to do. What? To improve their lives in some way. And this thought process gets constructed in a variety of ways. My last client was interested in making her wealthier daughter's friends not look down at her. So she wanted something that would look ostentatious so she wouldn't be ashamed when her wealthy her wealthier parents, who were the parents of her daughter's friends, came over to their house. So that was what she thought she would feel better if she didn't feel ashamed of her house when wealthy people came over. Well, that's good to know. That's why. So you then, focus on things that increase perceived value. And understand why she's nitpicky about things. And so you need to know your client. So what I'm talking about is a multi-level response that allows difficult clients to be what they are, difficult clients, that first of all pairs you with the clients that are going to be better fits for you. It's one of the reasons I wrote a book. I figured that if someone read the book that I wrote, Successfully Landscaping Your Marin Home, and they liked the book, that they would like me, because that's exactly how I think, what I do, what I say. And so it's a sorting process. Secondly, I'm sorting through my website. If I speak and say the way I normally behave in person on my website and don't butter it up or, make any effort to exaggerate, and they're happy with the website, they're going to be happy with me. If I take a client to the gardens that I've installed, see, there's this enormous quality continuum, and it's a grayscale. There's no right way to do a landscape. This is the quality level that I build stone steps to. Now, if you look at it and say, could you do a better job than that? I look at it and I say, I could. I don't think for the price point of this property that spending $30,000 to put in a much better step makes sense for a $200,000 home with real estate values what they are. But I can do it. So tell me what you don't like, because I'm going to do these steps the way I do here unless you give feedback. Now, if they say, well, I'd like this, this, and this, and I say, well, that'll add, $5,000 to the cost of that. We have a reference point. And if they say, fine, do it, now I'm not underbidding. So that's one area to avoid problems, is if you can bring a client to an actual reference point and get they love it, well, then that means if you do that for them, they're going to love it. If you just talk about a set of steps and don't go into, then they may have a completely different idea in mind to what you normally build. They don't ask you. They just assume and may be upset when it doesn't look like that. So these are all points. And obviously, if you're having a really difficult time with lots of difficult clients or lots of difficult clients' interactions, then it means you need to invest in more of these areas. So we've got attuning a client to your actual work, a good personality and value fit, a website that matches who you are, not pretending to be something different. A book, or some articles, etc., that you write that articulates your approach. The other thing that's very important is a questionnaire, and in the Success course, I list an 8-page questionnaire. I think it's actually 14 pages, 8 double-sided pages. A questionnaire that goes through every question that, when it didn't get asked, caused a problem at some point in the past. So, how many cars do you want to comfortably park? Well, if you complete the driveway and it comfortably parks 3 cars, and after pouring the cement you learn they want to comfortably park 6 cars, they didn't tell you, you didn't ask, there's going to be a problem. Many clients default to assume that because you're the professional, you're psychic. Of course, you're not, but they don't realize that. And they may actually hold that against you to the end. You were supposed to know. And if you didn't know by being psychic, then you should have asked. You were the professional. And to some extent, I agree with that. So we've got increased competency in marketing. We've got increased competency of doing the work. We've got increased competency in courtesy, contract writing, etc., all the various aspects, the soft skills in customer relations. We've got increased, some of that can be moving to a different location. If you're living in a ghetto somewhere and you're wanting to do more sophisticated landscapes, you're not going to get those jobs in a ghetto where nobody hires a landscaper. I started out on Whidbey Island, where it was a retirement island, basically. People who had really gone to town with their homes in Southern California would move up to Whidbey Island and try and retire there, keeping their budgets as low as possible on a retirement income. And so up there, $30,000 to $50,000 was the typical landscape job. Well, as soon as I moved to Southern California, $70,000, in other words, double the gross, was the typical job. So location determines a certain amount of the quality point, as well as how much work there is. And one of the interesting things is not only do the top 1% of tradespeople always have work, but the wealthiest people who hire them always have money. So you can easily understand that if you think of working for someone who has $100 million invested and the stock market plummets. They only have $50 million. That person is not going to have a brown lawn because they only have $50 million. They've still got all the money in the world to do a great job landscaping all of their homes. They just have $50 million instead of $100 million. You don't get to have a problem unless you're dealing with less than $100,000. And so, and there are regions where wealthier people live, and wealthy people always want to hire the best people. And so that's, that pairs up nicely. It makes sense. It costs more money to do better work. People with money can pay for better work. So statistically speaking, if you live in an area with wealthy people and do good work, you can stay fully employed, even in a recession. So location, competency in work, competency in marketing, competency telling who is and isn't a difficult client, competency preventing certain pitfalls from happening. If you know what someone is bad at or good at, they're good at blaming people, or they're bad at being generous and taking responsibility. If you know that, then you can avoid them or work around it. For example, you can have them initial everything. And then when they complain, you can say, is this what you initialed? So I think you need to be complaining about yourself. I've done what is agreed. And so these are a few of the different layers of responding to difficult clients. Avoid them. Be able to choose someone else. Improve your work, because if you do crappy work and make a lot of mistakes, meaning you're a difficult contractor and you're a difficult business person and you're paired up with a difficult client who is difficult at paying, difficult about blaming, and impatient and demanding about things that are irrational, it's going to be a complete and utter mess. But even if you're stuck, you didn't see it coming, if you do excellent work and document it well, then even if you get a bad review or rotten client or whatever, other people who are great clients, they've all dealt with difficult clients and they understand that. And so one difficult client is not going to ruin your career or your year. it's just going to make things more difficult for the duration of that job. You can also fire a client. By the way, I've done this a couple of times. I had enough work. I finished a design for one client. They were always pushing me. More than 98% of clients, what about this? What about that? Could you do this? Could you discount this? They did that more than 98% of clients. So by the end of the design, they said, we'd like you to do the job. And I said, you're going to have to find someone else. Well, then they were all upset. They wanted me to do the work. And I said, it just feels a little bit uncomfortable. Well, what if we did this? What if we did that? Well, I had other clients to choose from. And so I gave the job, to them. I did not sign a contract. Another client, I signed a contract. Suddenly the client went, did a Jekyll Hyde switch from being all pleasant and easy to demanding. I didn't like it. It was stressing out my relationship. I realized I was with a new girlfriend at the time, and I realized, this relationship, which is a good relationship with a good woman, may not make it because I'm so irritable coming home from this particular client. I went to the client. He was an attorney, right? So he was all good at manipulating and all this stuff. I said, I'd like to stop all interactions starting today. What's it going to take? What do you want? He said he wanted a check for $30,000. I got out my checkbook. Here's $30,000. Never going to see you again. My relationship took off. Again, you need to have backup plans. You need to have work waiting in the queue to do that. And, you can't do that if you're in debt. And so there are other things that are peripheral to this because, that ties into this whole other vein. You're going to take a job with a client you know is going to be difficult if you need to pay the rent. So how do you get out of that survival mindset? Well, you have to get out of a survival reality. How much savings is it going to take you before you'll rather sit and do nothing for 2 weeks than take a client that's going to maybe, not earn you any money, definitely irritate you? How much would you need to have in the bank so that those things you say, this is a good time for a vacation. I'm going to go read this book, do this, that, and the other. Draw a little bit on my backup fund. And so I'm going to be debt-free. I'm going to have X amount in the bank. And, they're all catch-22s, of course. You can't have a reserve fund and be debt-free if nobody will hire you, and nobody will hire you unless you're good. And so you work on the aspects of this that you can. And one of the most profound things that I've done is learned from the best. So I've read 500 books. I've talked with other professionals throughout my life. And, well, how do you deal with this kind of client? What is this? I learn from the best. And then I practice and make that better. And then I learn. It's a $30,000 lesson here, or this, that, and the other. But one of the things that you can do is learn from the best people in your life. If you know someone who knows more than I do, go learn from them. Pay them whatever they want. Find a mentor. But the Landscape Success course is my effort to go back and write what would have been nice for me when I was 17. And difficult clients is one of those things that, it's just, you're incredibly stupid if you think that saving an hour to learn from the best around difficult clients is saving you time if it sets you up for 3 months of grief or $50,000 in mistakes here and 100 over here and yearly not getting the results or the reviews that you want. That's being incredibly cruel to demand that everything gets reinvented. And so, I've always paid the best mentor that I could find, whatever they wanted, and shown them great respect, because they were the people who were going to save me the next $10,000 mistake, the next month of grief. And this is a huge topic.